major concern about immigration, and we will therefore make that a central debate. And I tell you one option that will happen is that immigration becomes the central political debate in British politics for the next 2, 3, 5 or 10 years' time. And in terms of Corbyn, by the way, they will daily taunt Corbyn. We're going to be tough on migrants, what are you going to do? And I tell you what, some of the right wing of the Parliamentary Labour Party will start to collapse in the face of that, as has already been seen and as Joseph made reference to. And actually, one very real possibility of this is, far from creating opportunities, I think ridiculous opportunities for the left. What we actually create is the path to a Tory victory in 2020 on a very nasty anti-migrant, anti-working class programme. So let's not go into this debate in terms of any illusions. And finally, for me, just in terms of what can we do? Because I think that a Brexit will be a disaster for the labour movement and a disaster for working people and a disaster for migrants and the whole debate around that in British politics. But we can. People say about reforming the EU. Whether we can reform it or we need to actually completely get rid of it, that's a secondary issue. The idea you can't win reforms, by the way, is something that I would take issue with. Clearly you can win reforms because reforms have previously been won from the EU. But we can start to raise the question about democracy. We can start to say, for example, on the European Central Bank, why can't we see the minutes of the European Central Bank when they're plotting, as they do, to do us in, when they're plotting what they do to Greece? We'll demand that. Why can't we demand to see what goes on behind the closed doors when they're discussing TTIP, for example? And by the way, the best opportunity we have of defeating TTIP is by working across Europe to defeat TTIP, rather than handing actually negotiations to a future Boris Johnson government. But also in terms of the workers' movement, I'll finish on this point, we need to start being a bit more ambitious about what we raise. If you take the steel industry, the idea, what we should be raising is actually we want a workers' plan for steel. We want a workers' plan for steel that isn't just a nationalist British plan for steel, but is actually a European-wide plan that then starts to raise international questions. What could we do to protect steel jobs, but also what could we do with that steel? What could we do to tackle climate change on a European basis from a working class point of view? On the question, and one of the issues in terms of the trade unions, what can we do? And Lucy mentioned this. There are measures that we can practically demand to stop employers undercutting wages using migrant workers and posted workers and so on. There are that actually can build solidarity between workers here and workers elsewhere in Europe. So I finish on this point. The illusion that's been created by the so-called left campaign to leave is actually all the problems are in Brussels. They're not. Actually on austerity, on cuts, on workers' rights, our main enemy isn't in Brussels, our main enemy is in Westminster. Thank you very much.